France was the fourth of the five European maritime powers of the 17th century, competing with the trade of the East. Spain, the fifth power, never joined the fight, and Portugal, Holland, and England profited immensely before the French noticed the trade. But despite joining last after the other three had gained a solid foothold, the French made up with their European rivals quickly and caught the attention of a sizable native audiences in India, making France the catalyst for European upheaval in the Indian peninsula. They were the first to attempt to subordinate the vast Mughal empire to a European intention with a handful of disciplined French soldiers and some natives Indian by arming, drilling and training them in European fashions, forming the famous Sipahi army. The French engagement with the East was initiated during the peaceful reign of King Henry IV in 1604, but after some lull in 1642 under the auspices of Cardinal Richelieu, La Compagnie de Indies was founded to revive the fresh intercourse with the East, with Madagascar as a midpoint resting place between Europe and the Indies, like the Cape of Good Hope was then for the Portuguese. Marco Polo first discovered Madagascar in 1298 and the Portuguese later reopened it in 1506. In 1642, the first French ship landed near the southern extremity of the island, but soon they found soil that looked fertile, did not produce anything worthwhile for the European markets, and had problems with the warlike races, detesting strangers and preferring savage freedom. And in 1672, when there was a surprising native uprising and massacre in Port Dauphin, the company moved to Massacarene, which the Dutch renamed Mauritius in 1598 in honor of their Prince Maurice of Nassau. These islands under the names of Isle of France and Bourbon became important for the French and later became famous as Mauritius and Reunion. In 1661, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, a middle-class merchant son and banker, became the first minister of France of the Sun King Louis XIV, who, with his firm will and direction, made a long-lasting impact in commerce, agriculture and industry, made the French navy strong, and led France to a new European position. He was well aware of the great advantages of the Dutch, Portuguese and English possessions in India, and one of his greatest objectives was to form a grand company in line with the English-Dutch model to open regular commerce with India. Accordingly, in August 1664, a new company was formed after merging the old Oriental Company with an exclusive new charter for a monopoly of navigation and commerce in the Indies and South Seas for 50 years, with perpetual concession to the lands occupied. It was also exempt from taxation and promised to make up for any losses in the first 10 years. And when during the fundraising, its issue was not fully subscribed in 1664, the Treasury advanced a fifth of the fund. But despite its commercial overtones, King and Colbert controlled the business, which was a state affair. In 1666, the company fitted out an expedition to India and made François Caron Director General of French Commerce in India, a man who at the time had a considerable reputation for his experience in the Eastern undertakings. François Caron was a French Protestant refugee to the Netherlands who had served the Dutch East India Company for 30 years, rising from cook's mate to the second position at Batavia and acquiring comprehensive knowledge of India, China and Japan. He returned to Europe when he was not promoted to the governorship of Batavia. Colbert persuaded him to take charge of the newly established French East Indies Company from 1665 until his death in 1673. In 1667, Caron made a voyage to Madagascar, but due to the deplorable condition of the settlements, he proceeded directly to India and reached Surat, the Babylon of the East, in February 1668. Surat literally means face in Persian, was a liberal, merchant-friendly, rich port city focused primarily on commerce. It was the jewel in the crown of the then mighty Mughal and was its maritime face in the west in the Arabian Sea. Other maritime powers had their factories along with the leading Indian and foreign Muslim traders. In 1611, the English became the first European to build a factory and the Dutch followed in 1616. Surat, a large city in the Gujarat Suba, was a hub of trade and commerce, having a diverse population of local and foreign merchants. The city had a small fort with the three main entrances, connecting it to the Kambi, Ahmedabad and Burhanpur, and was under the rule of a Mughal Nawab. It was populous, with a considerable number of foreigners, including Europeans. The Hindus were in the majority, working in trade, administration, and revenue departments, including the port and the mint. Among the Hindus, the Baniyas and Saraf were the most noted inhabitants, who were merchants by profession. The Muslim upper classes held key posts of honor and trust, while the Parsis in the minority were rich and industrious people. Surat, an emporium of both inland and seaborne trade, was the chief port of the Mughal Empire in the west, serving as a convenient place for the exchange of goods between central India, the Deccan, and the western parts of India. The chief exports for Surat were the fine cotton textile, cotton fabrics, cloth yarn, cotton yarn, wheat, and agriculture produce. The main import was bullion, mainly silver from West Asia for the exchange of goods, plus some luxury goods and spices. The Dutch and English were importing copper from Japan and Sweden for the use in weapons, coinage, and domestic utensils. Shah Bandar, a civil man, was in charge of the port, which was located 6 miles up the river Tapti at Suwali. The port had a Mughal mint where all the bullion imported in the form of foreign coins or others was converted into Indian rupees after levying fees. Before the Caron visit, 2 French representatives, Gauss and Babbar, reached Surat via Armenia, and with the help of the local Nawab went to Agra to present the letter of Louis XIV and surprisingly got the license for opening factories like the English. Accordingly, after arrival, Caron set up the factory and immediately sent back cargo to France with lots of praise. Even though France was in the golden age, at Surat, French business struggled from the very beginning due to the rapidly changing political climate in Europe as well as in the Indian subcontinent. Though the company was formed in line with other European entities, on the ground it was not so commercially competitive and often needed state funds and support which were scarce, resulting in more dependency on the local bankers and creating high unserviceable debts. Colbert's mercantilism of more export and less import did not work well here because France had to buy Surat goods with its very precious bullion, and the Indian cotton clothes became so harmful for the French cotton industries that under severe opposition later, the import of some kinds of clothes were banned. It was also a tasting time for the Mughals, who were at the peak. They were waging expensive wars in Deccan to expand their territory using Surat surpluses. The fame and riches of Surat also attracted Mughal adversaries and Marathas leader Shivaji, who made 2 devastating short raids and thoroughly looted the city, first in 1664 and then in 1670 to augment his war chest. This had created some financial problems apart from political ones, perhaps fading the liberal character of the city and gradually taking away its shine. The Mughal navy was almost non-existent, so Europeans, especially Dutch and English, and to some extent Portuguese, ruled the high seas, where the European deserters and aspirants as pirates always posed a serious threat to Surat's maritime trade. This in turn often forced the Mughals to confront Europeans in Surat, sometimes resulting in port blockades by Europeans, severely affecting trade for the months. But despite these facts, the infighting between the French factors at Surat themselves was the most important reason for the decline of French dispatches and virtually abandoning Surat in latter period. The key character in this was Caron himself, who did not want to share his fame and privileges with others.